So, this is going to be the last video for this game because the Axis player, Mr. has conceded. He's seeing too many things on the board that are going to be problematic for him going forward, and he has decided to surrender and concede the game to the Allies. So I wanted to take a second or two to just go through the video and or go through the board and have a look at some of the things that were going on. For starters, I think that probably right off the bat, the attack on the UK either needed to be pressed harder or not done at all. That was an early setback. Now again, one of the reasons why that didn't go as well as it probably could have is it's really actually hard to play this way, with emailing moves back and forth. So we've learned a lot about sort of what not to do next time, and I think we're going to be a little bit more careful with any of the really big battles. We're going to sort of do maybe round by round and double check a few things, because it was tricky to get what he was trying to do sometimes, and whenever I had to make a decision for him, I often made the wrong decision, and that was problematic. Now, in terms of sort of what would happen had the game continued, we can certainly say, for example, that the Americans would start becoming much more of a factor. I think regardless of what he would do with Gibraltar, I mean, unless he completely stacked it with the forces that he has over here and moved the planes and all of that stuff, it was probably going to fall next turn with the American forces that could come in from C-Zone 101 and C-Zone 86. So, Gibraltar was probably going to fall. And of course, the Americans, with the amount of money that they're making, can just continue to send wave upon wave towards Europe. He said in his concession email that one of the keys, especially in the Europe theater, was that he didn't think that he would be able to take Egypt. I have to say, though, that the British Navy that's here probably could have been taken out with a really concerted effort by the Axis. And that would have involved things like committing literally this entire Navy and every plane that could reach to here, and because I think he has a mathematical advantage. Now again, it would have cost him a lot. It would have cost him probably a number of his airplanes to do that. But I think he could have certainly cleared that sea zone. But taking Egypt still would have been tricky and problematic, simply because the forces in Anglo-Egyptian Sudan can come up and reinforce. There's a factory there now, so we can pump 3 new units per turn in, and Egypt really doesn't ever have to fall in that case. Up in Russia, the offensive sort of stalled a little bit. I mean, he'd have to do some cleaning up of Poland and Romania. I mean, he certainly could push forward, but it's kind of interesting the way that FF Cecil set up his forces here, because basically, Eastern Poland's pretty much wide open, but if he ever goes in there, the 2 flanks in Bessarabia and Baltic can just crush him. So it's a bit of a stalemate on the Eastern Front right now. So that would have been tricky going forward. I mean, he would have had to commit a lot more troops. Also, I mean, and I think this was a really, really good move too. FF Cecil took out Finland, and because Mr. had moved so many transports to the Med, Norway was going to fall next with really no way of getting it back anytime soon. So that was tricky. In terms of what was going on in the Pacific, let's have a look at some of the stuff that was happening there. I do think that there's a very, very good chance that Calcutta could have fallen in the next couple of turns had they made a really, really big push in that direction, because they had a lot of ground forces there. Now that would have meant basically completely ignoring what was going on in China, but Calcutta was in a little bit of trouble. Although, I mean, again, I mean, they could reinforce themselves and done what they could there to try and hold out. But they were, I mean, they turtled for a reason. They were looking at the odds. I had actually considered attacking that stack, but realized it was far too big for me to do anything with. And of course, with all of these tanks coming down as well, the Brits were in a lot of trouble here. Now, the thing that probably lost the game was the inability to take the Celebes. That was a tiny little battle. It only involved 3 pieces. It was an infantry and a tank versus an infantry. But the fact that the infantry managed to kill both pieces, the Anzac infantry managed to kill both pieces, cost him his bonus. Allowed, I mean, the thing is, what was going to happen in the next turn for the Aussies was they were going to come over with all of this Navy and this Air Force and really dig into this. And the only reason they would have been able to do that is because the Air Force could land in Celebes. They wouldn't have been able to reach this sea zone with the planes had Celebes not been open. So this Navy, if not completely destroyed, would have been severely depleted, which would have been, of course, a big problem for the Japanese because, again, their southern Navy is vulnerable now. Of course, the Americans are in a position to project power in a number of different directions now. They could send, submarines and destroyers and things like that into the Southern Navy, especially a weakened Southern Navy. And then, of course, they could go north as well, or back to Hawaii to connect with the new stuff coming in from San Francisco. Now, Japan was in a pretty positive situation for a pretty good chunk of the game, but it was starting to unravel a little bit towards the end. The forces up in Eastern Russia were also doing a pretty good job at sort of keeping them in check, not advancing forward, but certainly preventing them from making any real progress west. So it was a really, really interesting game. There were a lot of neat moves that we saw over the course of the campaign, but we did learn a lot about sort of what not to do, and I think when we play again, we're gonna change the way that we communicate with each other a little bit, so that especially some of the bigger battles get resolved a little bit more equitably. But anyway, it was a great game, and it was a lot of fun to play, and certainly kept me occupied here during the quarantine. And I hope we get a chance to play another one. So this is Sergeant Mercy signing off, and I hope you guys enjoyed that game. It was a lot of fun.